Okay, Alexander, we have got to talk about the energy crisis. Everything is getting expensive all over the world, but it looks like one man, one administration may be responsible for all of this. I don't want to lay all the blame on this one man and this one administration, but probably a lot of the blame has to fall on this man's shoulders, and this man is none other than the great Sleepy Joe. Sleepy Joe Biden. Alexander,
Absolutely.
tell us more about this.
Absolutely. Now, can I just say, I mean, before we get into the details of this, it might be useful for some of our viewers to actually go back, on our list of videos, on our history of videos, and to go back a couple of months to the spring and what some of the programs we were making then about his economic policy and about this administration's economic policy. And we were saying then that what would happen with all this vast overspending that was coming was that there would be a surge in prices. Well, we see a surge in prices, and we specifically spoke about a overwhelmingly likely surge in energy prices. And that is exactly what we are seeing. Now, there are underlying reasons for this problem, which go back many years. We've seen a major attempt over the last decade or so to change the direction of energy policy towards more what are called sustainable and carbon-free types of energy, which have meant that fossil fuel energy has been run down, and we've seen a lot of that going on, which has meant that there's been less investment in that kind of old-style energy than perhaps there would have been otherwise been. We've also seen particular conditions. We've seen the fact that there's been perhaps an overemphasis on natural gas in Europe because we don't like nuclear power very much. We've seen geopolitical issues, the inability of the Europeans to be on good terms with the Russians, who are their major natural gas producers. We see problems in the United States, where there's lots of hostility on the part of many people towards the shale oil industry, and where that problem has its own problems. And we see in China also an economy that is surging and which is struggling to keep up with its resource needs. But what has turned all of these underlying problems, which have been getting worse, but getting worse gradually, into a crisis this year, is what the new administration did. Because what they did at the start of this year was that they went for this massive reflationary, I know we call it reflationary, this massive spending program, which was intended to turbocharge US growth rates. We were seeing predictions of 8-9% growth at the start of this year for the whole of this year. So a huge surge in growth, a massive increase in demand. All of this at a time when other economies, like, say, China's economy, was gradually reopening. And what that's done is, firstly, it's created a supply crunch, because all of this massive surge in demand is creating a rise in demand for every conceivable type of goods, including, of course, energy. But it has also done something else, which is that, of course, it's led to inflation. Inflation is another way of saying that the value of money, the dollar specifically, is falling. Energy is priced in dollars. So when the value of the dollar, as measured by inflation, starts to fall, energy producers jack up their prices in order to compensate for the fall in the price of the dollar. Now, the problem with that is that because energy is something we all need, when energy prices go up like that, that adds another kick to the inflation spiral. All of this was totally predictable. It was predicted. We said back in the spring it would happen. And lo and behold, it's happening.
Yeah, but it didn't need to happen. I think
No.
that's the main point. There,
No,
there was no
of course not.
reason for Biden to come in and do any of this stuff.
Absolutely not. He actually inherited people. People completely forget this. He inherited a recovering economy. I mean, this is the great absurdity of it all. He didn't need 8 or 9% growth, which, by the way, he's not going to get because this inflation that he's unleashed upon the world and on the United States is going to undermine that. I mean, at the moment, as I understand it, real living standards in the United States are falling. I may not be absolutely right about that, but that's what I've been reading in one or two places, are falling because wage growth isn't keeping up with the growth of prices. He didn't need to go down this road. If he'd simply let things unroll as they were, he inherited a very strong economic position. He could have sat back, growth would have picked up, not to 8 or 9%, but to a sustainable, 3 or 4% perhaps in a recovery. And we wouldn't have a hot economy with surging prices and surging energy prices and supply chain disruptions. Well, not disruptions, that's what I even call them that. Supply chain breakdowns where nobody can keep up with this massive surge in demand. So it was obvious. And if you remember, there were people who were warning him about it. I mean, Anthony Summers, a person whom I absolutely loathe, by the way, but, who was a former Treasury Secretary, even he was telling him, don't go this way. You're overstimulating an economy which doesn't need to be stimulating. You're trying to increase growth beyond its organic level. And the result is, of course, the mess that we see now.
Yeah. To make matters worse, what I don't understand is you've got this mess of an economy right now, and the energy prices are getting jacked up, and everything is getting jacked up, like you said. But what do? They put forth this incredibly bloated infrastructure bill, which really does nothing except, line the pockets of special interest groups. And it doesn't really focus on infrastructure. And with all of these, and we have to be careful with all of these mandates that are being floated out there, you have a lot of companies laying off people. So I mean, you're actually firing people when you have an economy that is looking for employees. It's looking for workers. It's madness.
Yes, I mean, there's no logic to any of this. You're absolutely right. So, you have massive problems caused by wild overspending. So what do? You spend more. And anybody who suggests that you might want to cut back, well, you call them all sorts of horrible names and criticize them in every conceivable sort of way. You have a Federal Reserve Board, which is extremely nervously and aging towards some degree of tightening of monetary policy. And what do? You campaign, or some of you start talking about the need to sack the chairman of the Federal Reserve because he wants to try and bring back just a little glimmer of sanity to this situation. And you have, as you said, labour shortages across the economy. So you're going to do something which is going to make those labour shortages even worse. Now, I'm going to make a prediction because things do self-correct. I think at some point, not perhaps to the extent that ideally one would want to see, but I think that there will be steps taken at some point to rein in spending. I think Congress will start to tighten things up eventually, and I think the Federal Reserve Board will take steps to tighten things up to some extent also. But the effect will be either very low growth or no growth in the United States next year, or quite plausibly even a recession, as things have to balance out. But, think of that. You would have a recession where you didn't need one because if you'd left things follow their normal course, the process of recovery would have continued. And you wouldn't be in a situation today where you needed to cut back spending or tighten monetary policy because the economy was, growing at its natural pace, growing successfully from a recovery. But, I think, I'm not predicting, by the way, that there will be a recession next year because, one never fully knows. But I think it's now a real possibility. All of this, mind you, in the run-up to the midterms.
Yeah, there are people that are saying that there might be a recession. That is
Absolutely.
true. And I think you said the key word. You said the midterms. And you did say that the groups, the people that would rein this in, Congress and the Fed, you didn't say the Biden White House. You didn't say the Biden administration.
No.
So that means that the Biden administration is either completely clueless and incapable of managing a lemonade stand, let alone the United States of America, or the Biden administration and the Democrat machinery, because we all know that Biden is not really doing much of anything. The Democrat machinery is doing this on purpose. And you mentioned the midterms. The only reason I can think, that the plausible explanation for me as to why they want to wreck the economy in such a way is because they know in the midterms they're going to get completely pummeled by the Republicans, House and Senate. They know that Biden is on his way out and there's no possibility for him to win 2024. They're nervous about Harris taking over and they know that she couldn't possibly win in 2024. The only reason that I can see this going on, Alexander, is maybe strategically they're saying, you know what, let's completely wreck things before the Republicans take over. When they take over, they're going to inherit a complete basket case of an economic situation. And come 2024, we'll put forth a candidate who will be that candidate that will remedy and fix what we're going to say the Republicans wrecked. You know what I mean? That's the only reason I can see this political strategy. It's a sick political strategy, but maybe it is political strategy, or they're just plain stupid.
Well, I mean, they could be two. They could be both things at the same time, because, of course, it is a terrible political strategy, and it's ultimately a stupid one. No government, in its senses, goes about running its economy in a way that is going to precipitate a recession or even, God help us, a crisis. I mean, that is a stupid thing for a government to do. But when you have lots of people who think they are very clever but are actually very stupid, then that sort of absurdity ends up getting done. All I will say about it is this: if these people do want to create a recession in the United States next year, if they want to indeed worsen that recession and make it into a crisis, then they will do all the things that they have been doing for the last few months and are still intent on doing. As I said, going back to your original point, everything that we are seeing in the energy markets, with the inflation crisis, with the breakdown in supply chains, all of that was totally predictable, and it was predicted by people. It wasn't just, some people might have said it but didn't say it. People did say it. We said it on our programs. So, they have no real excuse if it all goes wrong, and if they're doing it on purpose, well, they're even greater fools than I take them for.
Yeah, well, I mean, just to close out the video, I mean, this is going to be a possible recession that a Republican Senate and House will inherit.
Absolutely. Exactly. So, blame the Republicans, say that it was all because, they're not continuing with our great program of, well, I'm not quite sure what kind of a program it is, but, our great reconstruction, our rebuilding of America. I mean, you remember with the Schumer, who said, that if let's win Georgia and then we'll remake America. Well, this is what they say. So all these bad Republicans are getting in the way because they insist on restoring some sanity to the economic situation, to the economic picture. Well, I can see that as a strategy. I mean, running against Congress, is not usually, as I said, as far as I can tell, a particularly successful game for a governing party to play. After all, they have the White House. But, they probably do think in those terms. I mean, you only have to look at them. Schumer, Pelosi, Schiff, AOC, all those sort of people. They're not the brightest knives in the drawer. And, of course, they could think in that way. I think it's quite plausible that they would think in that way. And, of course, some of the people who stand behind them, the various people who you might, I think you could justifiably call them the oligarchs. Well, the problem with oligarchs is that they're not real politicians, and they don't have their thumb on the pulse of America and of the American people and of the American economy, because they're completely insulated from those sort of things. If you're talking about, let us say, just to give one example, I mean, amongst many, if you're talking about, well, many examples, if you're talking about, Bill Gates, whomever, Bezos, whomever, I mean, how many Americans who do, work in factories, work in offices, work in farms, work in schools, work in shops, work in any kind of field, do they meet on any one day?
Yeah, I mean, the elites are just kind of saying, if you want my opinion, the oligarchs, the elites are saying, you know what, these clowns right now, they can't manage this country, so just break it all, let the Republicans take it over, and then we're just going to get our media cronies to say, look, you see, the Republicans broke it, put us back in power in 2024 without Joe Biden and Harris to get us nervous.
Well, exactly. I mean, I can see that. I mean, I can, as I said, it's an amateur approach to domestic politics. But these people are amateurs. They're very dangerous amateurs. They're very cunning and clever amateurs. But it is an amateur thing, and to be honest, if it fails, it'll be a disaster for them and still bad for the United States. If it succeeds, it might be better for them, but it will be a disaster for the United States, because you will be putting back in charge the people who've created the crisis in the first place and further weakened the political system in the process.
Yeah, well, the elites aren't going to care that much, because at the end
of
the day,
they don't.
They're globalists.
Well, exactly. That's the point. They are totally insulated from the lives of people to a degree that has never been the case in the US before. I mean, Rockefeller, John Rockefeller, the person who built up Standard Oil. I mean, he was in contact with his workers, as was Carnegie, as were all the sort of people who built up the great infrastructure, the industrial and economic power of the United States. That was one of the things. I just finished by saying, I mean, I can remember my father coming back from the US in the 60s, and he said one of the most extraordinary things about the US, when you went to New York, you went to a bar, and there'd be a worker there, and there'd be a millionaire, and they'd be able to talk to each other, and there was no sense of, social difference, and there'd be mutual understanding and mutual respect. He might have exaggerated, in truth, but there was some truth to this. Well, nobody today would say anything like that now.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right. theduran.locals.com. Check us out there. You will find all kinds of great information on our community. theduran.locals.com. The Duran Shop. 10% off when you use the code REALNEWS. Pick up a shirt, hat, mug, all kinds of great stuff there. And support the new media platforms. Alexander has a mug right there that he was bringing up.
And he's got a hat, hat too.
Awesome.
So, there we go.
You'll find the link down below to the shop and, of course, new media platforms. Odyssey, BitChute, SuperU, and Rumble. Support those new media platforms. We put all our videos there as well. Take care.